Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who were so unhappy because they had no children. But then they got the loving news that they were having a little girl. The king was so happy he had a christening feast for his daughter. He invited all the fairies he could find in the kingdom. There were 7 of them. Well, he had this big feast, and after the christening, they were sitting down for a feast with all gold plates and stuff when this old fairy came in who had left the kingdom 50 years before, and nobody had seen or heard from her since. Well, the king insisted that she sit down and eat, but he could not give her gold stuff like he had the other fairies. Well, this made the old fairy angry. Well, one of the young fairies sitting there heard her muttering because she was angry, so she went and hid behind the curtains in case the fairy tried to do something evil. So when time came for the fairies to give the little princess their gifts, the first fairy said, "The princess shall be the most beautiful woman in the world." The second said, "She shall have a temper as sweet as an angel." The third fairy said, "She shall have a wonderful grace all in everything she does." The fourth said, "She shall sing like a nightingale." The fifth said, "She shall dance like a flower in the wind." The sixth fairy said, "She shall play music as she never heard on earth." Now when it came time for the old fairy's turn, she said, "When the princess is 17 years old, she shall prick her finger on the spindle and she shall die." This made the people very angry and sad. The king and queen wept so loud. Well, then the wise young fairy that hid behind the curtain came out and said, "Do not grieve, O king and queen. Your daughter shall not die. I cannot undo what my elder fairy had said, but she shall not die. She shall fall into a sleep that will last 100 years, and then at the end of time, the king's son will find her and awaken her." Immediately, all the fairies vanished. The king, hoping to save his daughter from this misfortune, commanded that all the spindles shall be burned. Well, when the princess was 17 years old, she was wandering around the kingdom after her mom and dad had left, and she came across this old woman. She was so old and deaf that she never heard the king's orders to get rid of all the spindles. So the princess asked, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm spindling." And the princess said, "Well, may I try? I want to see if I can." So when the princess took the spindle into her hands, some way it pricked her finger. The princess dropped down to the floor, and the woman called for help. And the people come from everywhere, but there was nothing that could be done. When the good young fairy got the news that the princess had been pricked by the spindle, she got there as quickly as she could. She knew the princess had to sleep for 100 years, but she didn't want her to be frightened when she woke up alone. So she went around with her little wand and touched all the people in the castle so that they would sleep with her, and they would be awoken when the princess awoke. Well, the king and queen departed from the castle, giving orders that nobody should go in it. The command was not necessary, though, because after a little while there sprang a huge, thick woods around the castle, nor man or beast could enter through it. There were many changes in the kingdom after the princess had fallen asleep, because the king and queen had no other children. So the throne was passed on to another royal family, and the tale of the sleeping princess was almost forgotten. Well, one day the new royal family was out hunting in the woods, and the son and his dad seen this thick woods and these towers above it. Well, the son asked, "What is that?" But no one could answer. One day he found an old peasant, and the peasant said, "Your Highness, 50 years ago my father told me that there's this castle in the woods where a princess sleeps. She's the most beautiful princess ever. And she was put to sleep, and when she will be awakened by a king's son. At this, the young prince was determined to find out the truth for himself. So he began to make his way through the woods. To his astonishment, the stiff branches gave way and closed again after he entered, so no one else could follow him in. Above him was this beautiful palace. He was not afraid by all the statue-looking people that were not moving. He continued in and entered, and he found this gold chamber where the fairest sight he'd ever seen was sleeping, a princess of about 17 who looked like she had just fallen asleep. The prince, trembling, knelt down beside her and awakened her with a kiss, and now the enchantment was broken. When the princess looked at him, she said, "Is it you, my prince, I have waited for so long?" So happy were the two of them, they sat and talked for hours upon hours. As the castle began to wake up, everyone went back to what they were doing when they were put to sleep. The prince gave the princess his hand, and they all went into the great hall for supper. That evening the prince and princess were married, and the next day the prince took his bride to his father's palace, where they lived happily ever after.